Got it. Here's your paragraph toned up, no additions or removals, just elevated tone. So I'm standing in the middle of my own private gravel road in pajamas and boots, watching a line of cement trucks try to reverse up my driveway while Karen, clipboard in hand, is screaming at them that I gave verbal consent. Meanwhile, I'm holding the notarized letter that says otherwise. And in the distance, my newly installed gate starts lowering, sealing them all in. There's this collective oh no moment that ripples through the construction crew like a bad fart at a wedding. Karen doesn't notice right away. She's too busy waving her arms around like she's directing traffic at an airport. But the moment that gate hits the gravel with a metallic thunk and that red access revoked light starts blinking, she finally spins around and freezes like a raccoon caught in a flashlight beam. And in that moment, I'm not mad anymore. I'm just curious. How exactly did she think this was going to go? 2 weeks earlier, I was enjoying my usual morning coffee on the porch, watching the mist roll off the ridge. My land is peaceful. Not Instagram farm aesthetic peaceful, actual, real, earned silence. No street noise, no barking dogs, no leaf-blowing maniac. Just trees, dirt, sky, and the occasional hawk dive-bombing a squirrel. So when I saw survey flags pop up along my driveway, I assumed someone made a mistake. They were the bright pink kind, waving like little insults on sticks. I followed the flags down the half-mile stretch of gravel to the main road and found a white SUV idling at the entrance, hazard lights blinking. That's when I met Karen. Khaki capris, pastel blouse, sunglasses that probably cost more than my first truck. She was talking to a man in a neon vest, pointing at my road like she owned stock in it. I asked her what she thought she was doing. She introduced herself as the HOA president of Whispering Bluffs like it was a military title. Apparently, her brand new HOA neighborhood, barely 6 months old, was behind schedule on construction. They needed emergency temporary access for delivery trucks and cement pours. According to her, my road was technically within the easement zone and the most logical route. I told her no, politely at first. She insisted she'd already spoken with the county. I said, great, they'll confirm it's my road. And I thought that was the end of it. It wasn't. 2 days later, a backhoe rumbled down my driveway like it was taking a Sunday stroll, followed by a landscaping truck. Then 2 men in orange vests tried to unload a porta-potty directly across from my mailbox. I was in disbelief, not the kind of disbelief where you yell and throw things. No, this was the kind where you just stand there, mouth open, holding a coffee cup like it's the only thing tethering you to reality. I asked the workers who authorized this. They said, Karen. That was their only answer, like she was some HOA oracle granting divine permissions. That night, I dug out every document I had, the title deed, the parcel map, the easement terms, the county survey. My road, every foot of it, was private, not shared, not public, not in any way theirs to use. And just to be extra clear, I had a notarized letter drafted the next morning stating, in simple language, that no HOA resident or contractor had permission to use my road for any reason. I hand-delivered it to Karen's house. She smiled, said thanks, and shut the door in my face. I thought that was a Karen mic drop. It wasn't. It was a smirk before a storm, because the next day, I came home to find my mailbox uprooted, my gravel rutted by heavy tire tracks, and, no joke, a laminated sign posted at the edge of my land reading, * future Whispering Bluffs access point. Thank you for your cooperation, *. Hello friends, if you're new here, then don't forget to hit subscribe button. And if you like, then hit the like button also, and don't forget to tell me in the comments where you from watching this video. That was the moment I realized this wasn't just ignorance or arrogance. It was war. She wasn't going to take no for an answer. So I stopped saying it. I stopped arguing. I stopped responding to her emails, which she started sending daily, each one more passive-aggressive than the last, accusing me of delaying a community vision and obstructing progress. Meanwhile, I was quietly planning something far more obstructive than she could imagine. I called in a favor with a contractor friend. Had him install a motorized gate just off the main road, solar-powered, heavy-duty, and fast. I also bought a couple of motion sensors and a trail cam to capture any accidental entry. I didn't tell Karen. I didn't need to. She wasn't interested in listening anyway. Then I waited. This morning, it all came to a head. I was woken by the rumble of diesel engines and the sound of tires crunching gravel. Not one, not two, but 6 cement trucks lined up on my driveway. One had already started rotating its drum like it was ready to pour. Karen was out front with her clipboard, acting like she was managing a film shoot. I grabbed my coffee, slipped on my boots, and walked down in my pajamas. They say never argue with a fool, but I wasn't there to argue. I was there to watch. I asked the lead driver who authorized their entry. He said the HOA president had assured them it was approved. I held up my letter. Notarized. Dated. Legally binding. Then I turned and waved at the camera mounted to my fence post. Karen went pale. That's when the gate started lowering. The trucks were already inside. My property. My locked road. Her problem. And just when I thought this couldn't get more surreal, the driver stepped out of his truck and muttered, "So are we stuck here now?" I shrugged. Looks like it. Karen started dialing frantically. I overheard words like legal action, trespassing, and miscommunication. I just sipped my coffee. But here's the kicker. While she was panicking about the gate, one of the construction guys, older guy, maybe late 50s, walked over to me real casual and said, "You might want to check with zoning. They submitted the road plans using your parcel number." I blinked. What? He nodded. Yeah. Blueprints say this road's part of the HOA development. Like it's already theirs. I didn't respond. I just stood there, stunned, while Karen kept shouting into her phone. Because if what he said was true, this wasn't just trespassing. This was fraud. And suddenly, this wasn't just a gate war. This was going to court. I didn't sleep much that night. I just kept replaying that contractor's words over and over again in my head. They submitted the road plans using your parcel number. At first, I thought maybe he was mistaken. Maybe he saw the wrong blueprints. Or maybe it was some lazy clerk mistyping a number. But something about the way he said it, that quiet certainty, made my skin crawl. I fired up my old laptop and started digging through the county's online planning portal. Normally it's a mess of bad links and slow-loading PDFs, but I knew how to navigate it. I'd done freelance GIS mapping and parcel verification work for years. I searched for any permits filed under the HOA's development name. Sure enough, there it was, a PDF of their construction access application. And right there, in big bold type, the listed route included my parcel. My private road. No easement. No contract. No approval. Just stolen on paper. I stared at the screen, jaw clenched. This wasn't just Karen being clueless. This was Karen being calculated. She'd filed a fraudulent access route with the county, most likely assuming I wouldn't check, or worse, that I wouldn't understand how to fight it. My name, my parcel number, and a hand-drawn road overlay had all been slipped into the plans like they belonged to her. The audacity wasn't just criminal. It was personal. I wasn't just being trampled on. I was being erased. The next morning, I called the county zoning office. Got transferred 3 times before I finally spoke to someone who sounded like they'd eaten their breakfast and didn't hate their job. I laid it out plainly. My parcel number had been used in a permit without my permission. I asked for the name on the submission. No surprise, it was Karen's. Her full name, listed as the HOA president and point of contact. The guy on the phone went silent for a long second, then sighed. "Yeah," he said. "We've had issues with that development already. I'll escalate this to the zoning board, but you'll need to file a formal complaint if you want them to review it." So I did. I filed the complaint. I attached a copy of my deed, the notarized letter denying access, a timestamped trail cam photo of the trucks on my land, and even a screenshot of the PDF where my parcel was misused. Then I printed out 2 copies, one for the zoning board and one for my own records, because I had a feeling Karen wasn't going to back off quietly. And I was right. That afternoon, I found another surprise waiting for me at the base of my driveway. This time it wasn't a porta-potty or a backhoe. It was a person, a tall man in a cheap suit, holding a manila envelope and looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. He introduced himself as a process server. Karen had officially filed for a temporary injunction to force access through my road. She was accusing me of obstructing essential construction work. I couldn't help but laugh. Not a big belly laugh, just one of those dry, bitter chuckles that escape when you're too tired to scream. I thanked the guy, took the envelope, and walked back to the house in silence. Inside, I opened the packet. The wording was theatrical. Emergency injunction, critical timeline, community disruption, all buzzwords designed to make her sound noble and me sound like the Grinch. But the best part? She attached an email from the county zoning office. Unfortunately for her, The email included a line that said, "Pending investigation into potential parcel misuse." That single sentence nuked her entire claim. She'd handed me evidence of her own fraudulent filing inside her legal threat. I couldn't have scripted it better if I tried. Still, I wasn't taking chances. I called my buddy Sam, a zoning attorney I'd worked with on a land use dispute years ago. He owed me a favor, and this was the time to cash in. He read through the injunction, laughed harder than I did, and said, "This is one of the dumbest filings I've seen in a decade. You'll be fine, but let's file a response just to make it official." So we did. A neat 3-page rebuttal with attached exhibits showing not just my ownership, but Karen's blatant misrepresentation of facts. Sam even threw in a line about abuse of legal process, just to twist the knife. While we waited for the hearing, I stayed quiet. I didn't respond to HOA emails. I didn't answer the phone when an unfamiliar number popped up. But I did make one quiet purchase. A cheap tax lien lot right next to my main gate. Small, undeveloped, mostly scrub brush, but perfectly positioned. The entry point where the road met the public street was technically a separate parcel. And now it was mine. I bought it online for a few $1,000 and filed the paperwork the same day. Karen had no idea what was coming. The court date came faster than expected. I showed up in clean jeans and a tucked-in button-down. Karen arrived in full suburban battle armor, pearls, flats, and an entire binder of HOA documents that had absolutely nothing to do with the case. The judge skimmed the injunction, raised an eyebrow, then read our rebuttal. He didn't even ask questions, just leaned back in his chair and said, "This is a matter of private property rights. The defendant has no legal obligation to provide access." Injunction denied. Karen tried to protest. He shut her down with one sentence. "Ma'am, you cannot submit someone else's land as part of your permit and expect them not to notice." She stormed out without looking at me, but I smiled all the way back to my truck. I figured that would be the end of it. But of course, Karen doesn't know how to lose. 3 days later, she sent a new letter, this time from a different law firm. A friendly mediation request asking me to reconsider allowing temporary supervised access through my road. They were even offering to repair any incidental damage. I framed it because that was the moment I knew I'd won. They were desperate, and I wasn't even done yet, because while all that was happening, the county zoning board had opened an official inquiry into the HOA's development plans. Apparently, I wasn't the first person to complain. Someone else, likely another landowner near the ridge, had filed a similar claim. And now the entire development project was under scrutiny. Access roads, lot lines, even the community sewer plan. Karen had opened a can of worms she couldn't close. But the final cherry on top? A call from the county assessor. They wanted to confirm whether the new gate at the parcel entrance was permanent and whether I had any commercial plans for the access lot I just purchased. I told them it was just for privacy. They nodded, noted it, and mentioned they were reevaluating how the HOA had claimed road usage on their project map. I asked if that meant a fine or something. The guy chuckled and said, "Oh, it might mean a lot more than that." That night, I poured myself a drink, walked down to the gate, and watched the sunset through the trail cam monitor. The trucks hadn't come back. The road was quiet again. But something told me Karen wasn't done. She was quiet. Too quiet. And when a Karen gets quiet, that's when you double-check the lock. The quiet didn't last long. It never does with people like Karen. You'd think after being publicly shut down in court, personally embarrassed, and caught submitting fraudulent permits, she'd crawl back into her cul-de-sac and start a knitting club or something. But no. See, people like her don't learn the way normal people do. They don't reflect. They regroup, like bad franchises with unlimited budget and no original ideas. They just keep rebooting their nonsense with a new title. And sure enough, about a week after the failed mediation letter, I heard the faint whine of a drone overhead. At first I figured it was just some tech-savvy neighbor kid messing around. But when it came back the next day, then again 2 days after that, always hovering just above the tree line at the entrance to my road, I knew this wasn't recreational. I called the FAA's local office and asked if there were any registered flights near my property. The rep said nothing had been filed for that airspace and asked if I wanted to report unauthorized surveillance. I told him I'd think about it. Instead, I took a different route. I walked down to the end of the driveway with a sign I'd made using cardboard, a Sharpie, and pure pettiness. In bold letters. "Drone operator, send me a copy. I'm sure the county would love to see this too." The drone didn't come back after that, but Karen did. The next confrontation came face to face. I was trimming brush near the fence line when I heard tires crunching on gravel. I turned, and there she was. Karen, arms crossed, sunglasses perched on her head like a tiara of entitlement. Behind her was a beat-up sedan I didn't recognize. Some guy in business casual sitting inside like he was regretting every life decision that led him to this moment. Karen didn't say hello. She launched straight into her speech like she'd rehearsed it in front of a mirror. She said the HOA was offering to purchase access rights to my road, and they were prepared to be more than fair about compensation. I asked what she meant by fair. She named a number so low I thought she was joking. I laughed. She didn't. Then she added, "It would be easier if you agreed. You know, before this becomes complicated." I looked at her for a long second, not because I didn't know what to say, but because I was trying to decide whether she had just threatened me or if she genuinely thought that was diplomacy. I told her no deal, no talks, no access. I said, "You want a road? Build your own. I'm not here to subsidize your bad planning." She tried to protest, but I cut her off and pointed toward the newly acquired access lot, where a crew I'd hired had just finished installing a chain-link fence and a locking gate. Not a cheap one either. This one had buried steel posts, concrete footers, and a remote camera rig mounted high enough to capture license plates. I waved. The camera blinked red. The guy in the sedan got out and muttered something about leaving. Karen stood there, red-faced, clearly not used to losing in person. She opened her mouth to say something but thought better of it. She left without another word. The following week, I got a letter from the county zoning board. Short, polite, but very clear. They had completed their investigation. The HOA was officially cited for multiple violations: misuse of parcel data, failure to disclose landowner communication, attempted use of private property without authorization. And the best part? They would be reassessing the approval of construction permits tied to the access route. Translation: Karen's development was now stuck in bureaucratic limbo. No road, no trucks, no way forward without a massive rework of their plans. Now, you'd think that would be the climax, the big win. And it was sweet. But what made it even better was watching how the HOA residents themselves reacted once the truth started leaking out. They weren't happy. Turns out, being promised luxurious hilltop homes and easy commutes doesn't sit well when all the trucks vanish and progress halts. I started getting anonymous notes in my mailbox. Some were apologies. Some were desperate pleas. One just said, "She never told us it wasn't hers." That one made me laugh out loud. But not all the messages were friendly. Someone dumped a pile of gravel across the access lot one night. Sloppy, haphazard, but just enough to block the gate. I caught it on camera, of course. And while the footage was too grainy to prove who did it, I had my suspicions. Instead of calling the sheriff, I posted the footage on a local community forum. No names, just the caption: "Someone made a mess. Hope they come back and clean it up." 2 days later, the gravel was gone. I didn't have to lift a finger. Still, the tension lingered. Every time I went into town, I felt eyes on me. Whispers behind grocery shelves. A few neighbors who used to wave now stared or looked away. But that was fine. I wasn't here for approval. I was here for peace. And peace meant drawing boundaries. Literally. I took things a step further. I landscaped the access lot. Not just fenced it, but fully transformed it. Brought in some native shrubs, a stone garden path, a couple of birdhouses, and a nice little plaque that read, "Private family green space. No access beyond this point." It looked pleasant, almost quaint. Unless you knew the backstory. Then it looked like the most beautiful middle finger in botanical form. But even after all this, I couldn't shake the feeling that Karen had one last move. People like her always do. They lie low, regroup, and wait for some tiny sliver of opportunity, and then they pounce. That's why, when I saw the county assessor's SUV parked just beyond the ridge one afternoon, I didn't assume the worst. But I didn't assume the best either. I walked up, introduced myself, and asked what brought them out. The man, mid-40s, polite, said they were doing a reevaluation of parcels related to Whispering Bluffs due to recent development complications. I nodded and kept the small talk going. But before he left, he glanced down the hill and said, "You know, there's a rumor the HOA is looking to challenge your parcel designation. Claim it was improperly zoned." I smiled. Let them. I've got 10 years of zoning work under my belt, and a drawer full of original plats. He grinned back. Didn't think they'd get far, but they're trying. That night, I pulled every document I had into a binder, printed, indexed, and labeled, just in case. Because if Karen really wanted to play her last card, I was going to make damn sure it turned into a boomerang. And when the registered letter arrived 2 mornings later, with a new complaint filed against me in small claims court for obstructing community access, I didn't panic. I poured myself a fresh cup of coffee, opened the gate's camera feed, and smiled. She was coming back for round 4. And this time, I wasn't just ready, I was ahead. I walked into the small claims courtroom with a binder tucked under my arm, like it was a birthday present. The room was plain, just a few rows of wooden benches and that faint scent of air conditioning and floor wax. Karen was already seated at the plaintiff's table, flipping through a folder stuffed with mismatched documents, like she was still hoping something inside would make her look competent. Her lawyer this time was new, young, nervous, probably hadn't realized he was about to defend a client whose greatest legal strategy was faking authority with a clipboard and a passive-aggressive smile. The judge, a tired-looking man with the aura of someone who'd already seen 3 cases about barking dogs that morning, called us forward. Karen's lawyer stood first, rattling off a list of vague grievances. Claims that I had obstructed a community's ability to proceed with infrastructure, that I had acted with malicious intent, that my green space landscaping was a transparent attempt to disrupt public utility access. I let him finish. I even nodded politely, like I was grading a high school debate team. Then I stood calmly, placed my binder on the table, and asked if I could submit Exhibit A. Inside were the original deeds, parcel maps, county zoning responses, a notarized letter, footage timestamps, and a certified letter from the county stating I had full rights to restrict access. But the best part wasn't any of that. It was a signed statement from the zoning board, dated just 1 week prior, confirming that Whispering Bluffs HOA had been cited for planning fraud and misrepresentation of property lines. When I read that line out loud, I swear Karen's lawyer blinked like he just remembered he left the oven on at home. The judge took a beat. Then he sighed, looked directly at Karen, and asked if she had anything further to add. She stood up, red-faced, and tried to launch into a speech about community good, how the development was suffering, how her residents were losing money. But the judge held up a hand and said, "Miss Karen, this is not a zoning hearing. This is small claims, and you've brought no valid claim. Case dismissed. Please do not return to this courtroom with matters already ruled on by higher jurisdiction." And just like that, it was over. Or so I thought. Outside the courthouse, I figured Karen would storm off. Instead, she waited for me in the parking lot, like some kind of HOA final boss. She didn't speak at first, just stood there, arms crossed, waiting for me to say something. So I said the only thing left to say. "You're done, Karen. Go home. Build your road. Leave mine alone." She squinted at me and said, "You think you've won, but the board's still on my side. And if I go, someone worse will take my place." I just smiled and said, "Good. Let them. At least they'll know where the line is." She turned and walked away. And this time, she didn't look back. By the end of that week, something shifted. Not with Karen, but with the people in her HOA. A rumor must have spread. Maybe from the courtroom. Maybe from some of the residents who were sick of her constant crusades. The tide started turning. A man in a dusty truck flagged me down near the ridge and asked if I was the one who blocked the truck. When I said yes, he just nodded and said, "Good. She's been lying to us since day one." A woman with a stroller came up to my gate one morning and apologized, said she hadn't realized the access plan was fake, told me Karen never mentioned anything about using private land without permission. Then the call started, not from lawyers or county clerks. These were quieter, almost embarrassed voices, board members, HOA residents. Some wanted to know what had really happened. Some wanted advice on how to remove Karen. A few just wanted to vent. I didn't get involved. I didn't need to. The damage was done, and the foundation she'd built her little empire on was already cracking. The final collapse didn't come with a bang. It came with a vote. I heard about it through the grapevine, a special HOA board meeting. Karen was asked to step down. She tried to fight it, of course, claimed she was the only one with a vision. But apparently, when you spend half your tenure fighting a property owner you don't control and racking up citations with the county, people stop seeing your vision as leadership and start seeing it as a lawsuit waiting to happen. They replaced her with someone quieter, someone who reached out through an actual attorney who understood land law and offered a formal apology. I accepted the apology, and then I turned it into something useful. The new HOA president and I sat down for coffee, not as friends, but as two people who understood the value of drawing lines on a map and sticking to them. We talked about rerouting the access road through an unused strip of county-owned land that they'd previously ignored because it required more work. I helped them figure it out, not because I owed them anything, but because I was tired of the war and I figured a little cooperation now would ensure I never had to deal with someone like Karen again. A few weeks later, the new access road was approved. Construction resumed, slowly, carefully, and far away from my property. The trucks never returned to my driveway. The gravel stayed clean. The gate stayed shut. As for Karen, she didn't disappear. She just shrank. Word was, she still lived in the development, but she'd become that neighbor, the one people avoided, the one whose opinions were no longer requests but background noise. Her clipboard days were over, her authority revoked. And while I didn't throw a party or post about it online, I did add one final touch to the stone marker at the entrance to my private road. Just beneath the words, "No HOA access," I carved a simple message. Some fences are built out of wood, others out of lessons. I stood by that gate one evening, just as the sun dipped behind the ridge, and watched a deer cross the path that used to be overrun with tire tracks. The air was still, no diesel fumes, no shouting, just quiet. Earned, defended, and completely mine. In the end, I didn't just win. I reminded an entire community where the boundaries are, and what happens when someone tries to rewrite them without permission. Karen tried to build a road through my life. I built a wall through her plans. And the view from this side, it's never been better.